I remember that night over there, I was pacing back and forth at the hotel in Longview, and a lady walked in and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm going to be speaking to the East Texas Credit Union Association in a few minutes. She said, are you nervous? I said, well, no, I'm never nervous. She said, really? Then what are you doing in the ladies' room? But my entourage, I had no idea everyone was coming, but gee, my son and all else, I'll stand out just a moment, please. We're all staying down at the Eden, and we really enjoy our stay here. It's been we were here a couple of years ago when Uncle Obama was here, and that was not exactly the best situation. But I'm certainly glad for me to be with you today. And you know, we have a lot of problems in the United States, and with the housing and the jobs and the general economy. But even with these kind of problems, you can still be a success. You can still be a success. Not only do we have trouble being successful, sometimes we have a problem defining the word success. The dictionary definition of success: success is the attainment of wealth or power or eminence. It's getting something. Another definition I like much better says that success is the progressive realization of a worthwhile, predetermined goal. Success is the progressive realization of a worthwhile, predetermined goal. In other words, from the moment that you select a worthwhile goal and you begin to work for it day by day, week by week, month by month, you are already a success. Successful people typically have some similar characteristics. They believe in themselves. There are people here today that are probably selling a product or perhaps a service, but actually every person here you sell every day of your life. You sell ideas to your husband, to your wife, to your boss, to the people that you come in contact with. And I think that we'll all agree that to be successful at selling, the first thing you must sell is yourself. Selling yourself has got to do with the way you walk and talk and smile and shake hands. It's kind of a projection out to the other person. But more than anything else, selling yourself means believing in yourself. Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, once had to testify in a trial. As he was preparing to take the stand, the clerk of the court asked this question: do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? He said, I do. He was asked to state the witness chair and to state his name and his occupation. He sat down and said, I'm Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm the world's greatest living architect. After the trial was over with, one of his friends came up to him and said, my goodness, Frank, why did you make a statement like that in front of the judge and the jury and all those people, that you were the world's greatest living architect? And he said, I had to. I was under oath. This is believing in yourself, and this is the kind of belief that ultimately a successful person will have. Now, I don't mean a haughty, condescending look down on all other people, that you're far superior and better than they are in every aspect, but I do mean a firm, sincere belief in the unique talents that God has given to you. And then successful people believe in other people. And this is sometimes where we all fall short, because we have that tendency sometimes to prejudge people. We look at the car they drive, the clothes they wear, their religious views, their political views, and sometimes we make quick, poor judgments about people. Miss many opportunities to share with them. But when you believe in someone enough, and you tell them that you believe in them, sometimes it's amazing what they can accomplish. I'll tell you a true story that happened in New Orleans probably 14 or 15 years ago. There was a Professor Sweeney who taught behavioral sciences at Tulane. He taught that if you believed in someone enough, told them they could accomplish almost anything. He wanted to try it out in an actual case. And a black man named Harold Johnson, a former janitor at the Holiday Inn, came to work at the Tulane Center there. Professor Sweeney and Harold Johnson met each other in the coffee room, got to talking. Professor Sweeney said, Harold, you know, you've got a lot on the ball. I believe that you could learn a lot about computers. Would you like to do it? And he said, I sure would. I don't know anything, but I would like to learn. So Professor Sweeney began teaching Harold Johnson an hour early before they went to work in the morning, the fundamentals and things about the computer. It was about 4 or 5 weeks. The school found out about this, and they were a little concerned. They insisted that Harold Johnson take an IQ test. to see if he was qualified for this work. He took this test and the score was so low, he said he'd probably never know anything about computers. But Professor Sweeney said, either this experiment goes on or you have my resignation, and they reluctantly did that. This continued week after week. Harold began to go into the computer programming room and talk to some of the programmers, getting help from them, still working with Professor Sweeney. The time came where Professor Sweeney left, where he was a professor at the University of Georgia, in Athens, Georgia. And Harold Johnson, former janitor, he left too, where just before Katrina, he was head of a department at the Pan American Life Insurance Company nationwide in their data processing area. What I'm suggesting to you is that you build bridges away from yourself, bridges out to other people, bridges of kindness and sharing and helping and believing. And soon others wearing all kinds of cornucopia are going to come to you across the span that you have erected. And your life will be richer and fuller for believing in other people. Then successful people are persistent people. They keep on keeping on when everybody else says it's time to quit. No better example of a persistent person than the famous inventor Thomas Edison. He tried hundreds of times just to achieve one result, like the filament of a tube. On one occasion, he stood by helplessly and watched his laboratory burn to the ground. Someone said, "What will you do now?" And he said, "We'll begin rebuilding in the morning." When my wife Betty began a little business quite a few years ago now, there were people telling her that she shouldn't do it. She had 3 small children at home. Nobody in her family had ever sold before, and she couldn't either. And that the company she was going to represent would probably be bankrupt within a year. But as we look back now, one of the things that she did have was a dogged determination to keep on at a goal that she knew was right for her and for our family. And I'm very delighted that she did. It allowed me to take an early retirement. We were, several years ago, we were at a Christmas party with a number of friends, and some of those people that had made initial comments about Betty that shouldn't be doing this, they were there, and one of the guys, I think he wanted to still have some negative comment about the situation. And there was a lull in the conversation there, and one of the men looked over at me and he said, "Charles, does it bother you that your wife makes more money than you do?" And I said, "No, it doesn't bother me." I said, "She makes more money than you do too. Does that bother you?" You don't have to be, an expert in finances or something to be a success. Betty cannot balance a checkbook. I mean, if the amount of money, the balance in her checkbook is within plus or minus $100 of what the bank statement had, that's close enough for her. But I said, Betty, you need to get this thing closer. They're clearing checks quicker now. You're going to be writing a check one day, you don't have any money today. Well, she said, "Here, you do it." So the next month, I'm checking everything off in her statement there. And I see by one of the checks she's written is the letters ESP. I go down a little further, one of the checks she's written is ESP. I said, "Betty, what does this ESP mean?" She said, "Oh, that means error someplace." But you don't have to be a financial expert, but you do need to have a persistence to keep on keeping on. Another characteristic of successful people typically is that they know how to handle barriers. Barriers come in front of us in all different shapes and sizes. They were in all kinds of situations. Some of you may remember the barrier of the 4-minute mile. It was thought that years no one would ever run the mile in under 4 minutes. Glenn Cunningham, a famous miler from the University of Kansas, ran in 4 minutes and 1 second. And everybody thought that's just about as close as anybody will get. But then in 1954, a young Englishman, anybody remember his name?
Roger Bannister.
Roger Bannister ran the mile in under 4 minutes. Worldwide news. Then a couple of months later, another man did it. 9 months later, 6 men did it in one race. And now they've knocked another, 10 seconds off of it on that. What about the speed of sound? It was a barrier that nobody would ever be, we wasn't going to be able to do it. You wasn't going to be able to fly in this atmosphere over the speed of sound. You couldn't do it. You couldn't get a propulsion system big enough to do it. And if you did, the moment you reached that speed, it was going to disintegrate and you would be killed. But who was the man that did that?
Chuck Yeager.
Colonel Chuck Yeager did that. And now the planes fly at level speeds, probably double the speed of sound. What about climbing Mount Everest? For years, thought nobody would climb Mount Everest. But then in 1941, Sir Edmund Hillary and his shepherd guide did it. Now hundreds have done it. And dozens have died trying to do it too. The barriers. But the kind of barriers that bother us more than anything else are those that when people tell us, you cannot do this. You don't have enough education. You didn't go to the right school. You don't know enough people. You don't belong to the right clubs. We have to be careful. These barriers come up. And then we'll say the same thing about ourselves, that I cannot do this because I don't have enough education. I don't know enough people. I don't belong to the right clubs. But the successful person is a person that can work his way over or around or through the barriers that come up in their lives. Then successful people, I think, have another special characteristic. They can admit they made a mistake. Can admit they made a mistake. This is very difficult for some people to do. This is practically impossible for some people to do. But there comes a time in our life when the correct thing to do, the best thing to do, is to say, hey, I made a mistake. Let's do it right this time. Let's clear the air. Because when there's a situation where people will not admit they made a mistake, it can create chaos in the workplace. Being able to admit you made a mistake is a good characteristic. And then finally, successful people tend to have a zest for living. They get excited about life. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, in his book, The Power of Positive Thinking, when he's talking about people who live a drab, mundane, monotonous life, his advice, get out there, get excited about something. Do something different. Get out there and have some fun and laugh a little bit. I mean, learn to play the guitar, learn in different languages. You know, do something, work with the schools, sing in the church choir. But get involved and get out there and have some fun and laugh. A few years ago, there was a retired Methodist preacher in Philadelphia. He was in his 70s, lived alone. He always attended the Thursday meeting of the Rotary Club. He sat at the same table. Then one week he wasn't there. Someone said, "Where's the preacher?" But no one knew. He missed 2, 3, 4 meetings. I was worried to death about him. 5 weeks later, he calmly walks in and sits down. The president stops the meeting and said, "Preacher, where have you been? We've all been worried to death about you." He said, "I've been in jail for 30 days. I said, "You in jail? You don't harm anybody. What happened?" He said, "I went to New York City to do a little sightseeing. I was just walking down to Radio City Music Hall to buy my ticket, and a beautiful young woman with a policeman walked up to me. She pointed her finger at me and said, 'He did it.' He said, 'To tell you the truth, I was so proud, I pleaded guilty.'" I hope you have a sense of the ridiculous. I hope you can laugh loud and long at what the world does to you. And most of all, I hope you can laugh at yourself. Laughter is the sunshine of the soul. And I hope that you never get so old or so tired or so hard or so mean that you forget how to laugh. Because when you know it or not, you are essentially dead. No, success in our lives typically does not come from, as I say, where you went to school, the car you drive, the clothes you wear, the subdivision you live in. Success more often comes from believing in yourself, from believing in other people and telling them that you believe in them. It comes from being able to handle the barriers that come your way, to be persistent at goals that you know is right for you and your family, to be able to admit you made a mistake, and to have a zest for living. This concludes my introductory comments. I went to a meeting in Dallas, Texas a couple of years ago, and there were probably about 100 people at the meeting, and we was at the Anatole Hotel in Market Center, very nice place. And the speaker posed a question that I never really thought about before. He said if you were at home watching television, they interrupted the program and made the announcement that the Russians had just lost a nuclear attack against America. This was not a test. This was for real. Some way the Russian hardliners in the military had gotten control of everything, and they decided to go all out, try to conquer the world, and they were going to start by hitting the United States. And several hundred ICBMs were headed for America. And they made the statement on the television, and you have about 20 minutes to live. And he said, what would you do with your final 20 minutes on this earth? We talked about it in groups, and then we kind of came back together, and what we decided we might do might be what you would do. We said we would have first a very powerful and very honest talk with God. But then we would begin then to tell our family and our friends close by that we love them. Then there would be a rush with the telephones as people would begin to call their son or their daughter, their mother or father, or a good friend, to tell them that they love them. Ladies and gentlemen, let's don't wait for a Russian ICBM. Let's do it now. The Bible says we should love our enemies. But just for fun, sometimes why don't we try it out on our friends? We need more giving and helping and sharing and believing. More people living by the golden rule. We need more people that are committed to the goals and the programs of this Rotary Club right here. You know, there's a difference between being involved in the Rotary Club and being committed to the Rotary Club. It's kind of like the Japanese kamikaze pilot in World War II who flew 26 missions. He was involved, but he was not committed. Because when you are committed, you will make it happen. It's been a pleasure for me to be with you today, and my wish for each one of you is that may the road rise to meet you, may the wind be always at your back, may the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of His hand.